Welcome to the No Apologies channel. It's another edition of Taking Out the Trash. So, right with me here in the studio.
This is in my studio, not in you.
Is the incomparable Dr. Harvey. Dr. Harvey, how are you, my friend?
Hello.
Put her there.
Good.
We're missing our Steve.
We're missing Steve. He's out and about in the bush.
He's gadabouting.
But he'll be back soon.
We hope so. We hope so. We miss you, Steve. Anyway, on our Taking Out the Trash tonight, just a little bit of an intro on what Taking Out the Trash is. Typically, scriptures tell us in the epistles that part of the Christian hygiene, ecological hygiene, is to find things that are non-biblical and take them out. Well, sometimes taking out the trash also is looking at some of those external things that come in, and tonight we're going to look at those. Now, how we look at things, now our topic tonight, by the way, I didn't say it, our topic tonight is Richard Dawkins and his famous, what did you call it, neo-atheism?
Pseudo-atheism.
Pseudo-neo-atheism, semi-atheism, likes to think of. Anyway, moving on from that, we'll get into those reviews and critiques as we get there. What we do as a method, typically with the Taking Out the Trash, is we try and find some material fully in context.
So the three rules for sound biblical exegesis: context, context, context. Okay.
And what we'll do with that is get people's shorts.
Woohoo! Eat my shorts, Shelbyville! Eat my shorts!
Yes, eat all of our shirts.
And again, I say this all the time, it's not their underwear, but they're short videos. And we use those fully unedited, untinkled with, and we just play them and review them as is. So we know that we're doing a full contextual review because they're responsible for their own content that they put up. And so we're looking at those in context.
As are we.
As are we. And so, look, if you have any thoughts or comments about us, by all means, put them down below. If you like what we're doing, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you want to subscribe. Leave comments. I've probably already said that. Anything else?
No.
I think we'll get straight into it.
Subscribe and get notifications.
Oh, get notifications. Hit the bell and do that little thing on the side that says ding, ding, ding notifications and get all of those. Without further ado, though, let's get into the high priest of neo-atheism,
Yes.
Richard Dawkins.
With the recent Pew study showing that atheists and agnostics know more about religion and the Bible and holy books than believers. I suspect this did not pass over your observational skills when that came out. Why do you suppose that is?
Well, yeah, I think there are two reasons. I mean, the first reason is that atheists and agnostics know more about everything. And the second reason is that the more you know about religion, the more dopey you realize it is.
So the results then, you would say, are a proxy for education or intelligence?
Well, that was my first reason. But
Yeah.
I think the other reason actually is probably true as well, because if people really, really read the Bible and saw what an utter horror story it is, they wouldn't be so keen on it. I mean, they wouldn't base their morality on the Bible for a start. And I hope nobody here bases their morality on the Bible, because if so, we're in a bad way.
I don't know, where do they get this idea that you're strident? Don't mince words. How do you really feel? No, just kidding.
No. I mean, that is more or less undeniable. If you actually look at what the Bible enjoins you to do, it's utterly intolerable by modern standards. And of course, we get away from that by saying, "Oh, we don't believe that anymore. We've given up stoning adulteresses to death." Actually, not all parts of the world have given up stoning adulteresses to death, but we, at least in Christendom, have given up stoning adulteresses to death. So we've given that up. But it's cherry picking. You choose which verses of the Bible to give up and which verses to keep. So you might as well use whatever criterion you use for choosing and dispense with the Bible in the first place.
So a tremendous amount of biblical ignorance there, along with the arrogance, Harvey. There's quite a few things. That was a slightly longer clip. But that being the case, have a go. What did you think of Tricky Dicky there?
Yeah, well, as you say, is the high priest of agnosticism and has made an a priori commitment to regard the biblical story as quite simply ridiculous, and anybody who believes it is insane or willfully ignorant. Whether the Bible has got any historical backing, he doesn't dare to touch, because it historically is very well backed up with extra biblical sources which point to the events in the Old and the New Testament
absolutely.
as having been well supported. The Bible is centered around Jesus, whom Dawkins hates or despises or feels pity for, because he doesn't believe that God exists, so God can't come in the flesh. Sin doesn't exist. We evolved from slime with very little evidence. But he trumpets the fact that the Bible has got no evidence of the miraculous, and he relies on that very heavily. He dedicates his book, The God Delusion, to a man who he and his wife have become Christians since, because no matter how eloquent and glib his argumentation is, the reality of his lived belief is not one of peace and tranquility and hope and a future and helping the downtrodden and pulling people up out of difficulties and compassion. In fact, they're the least compassionate people. They give virtually nothing to anybody elsewhere who's in pain or suffering, but constantly opine that Christians are stupid to believe what they believe. And yet the beliefs drive them to do tremendously good work. Now, they oppose what God calls sin, which he doesn't think exists. And so I think you've got to deal with each of his objections one by one.
So let's look at the first one there. I was looking at the first bit, and really that was a pretty
Vitriolic,
broad. It was from him, absolutely, and you know, you have given us a bit of a broad brush background into him. I took.
And with clapping seals in the background at key points.
Well, he's at in this particular video. He's at a love-in, and you know and churches do that. It's an atheist love-in, and churches do that too.
Yeah,
and what's really important for us to do is to pull apart the various things that have been said and left unsaid in there, and the way he goes about combining a number of things. So first off, there was that claim that you know, atheists and agnostics know more about the Bible or more about religious texts than the adherents do. Now, one thing that you and I will want to do, to be really clear, is to not fall into the same classification error that they do, is they put all religions together. And what Christianity does, quite rightly, scripturally, is separates Christianity from all of that muck, and everything else is in the same category. So there are only two categories in his mind, that is all religions and non-religion. And in the Christian perspective, the way of looking at that is not that way at all.
No.
All religions are not the same. In fact, there is only one true religion, and that is the biblical Christian religion, even though there are many families and shades of colour within that. And then there is everything else. There's the Christian and there's basically the pagan. That's the way the scriptures treat things.
That's a Christian viewpoint, certainly. And I mean, all of them can be empirically examined. Christianity is the only one that's quite happy to have its innards
looked
dissected.
at, its skirts lifted. It's
absolutely right.
It's biopsied.
And there are many people who have decided to abandon the tenets of the Christian faith after looking at it, but many others who look at the Christian claims and look at the historicity of the Bible, look at how it addresses reality as it is, and gives the best explanatory power to the text about the state of who we are, where we're going, why we're here, and what's good and evil.
So one interesting point that we want
to... It answers the big cultural questions.
Well, it
the
does.
others do not permit scientific scrutiny to the extent that Christianity has. And bear in mind, there are millions of devout and capable, extraordinarily capable Christian scientists.
Hundreds of thousands of them.
And those who pioneered science and the scientific method in years gone by did so because of their reliance on the veracity of their Christian faith.
So here's a question to answer one of his conjectures in there. Given that we did that first little bit of clarifying and saying his classification at the start is unhelpful at best and wrong at worst, to have all religions like this and all agnostics like that, and they're the right ones, and everyone who is slightly religious is wrong. And we've said, well, first of all, let's turn that classification on its head. We're not buying into that classification. We instead bring a biblical classification on that. And then on that, can you be a Christian and born again, religious adherent, and not know your scriptures very well? And will that disqualify you from faith?
No, obviously the thief on the cross might have known some of the scriptures he might have learned as a boy, but Jesus gives him a guarantee that he will enter paradise on that day because of the expression of faith. If it was dependent on knowledge and intellectual prowess, then it's unfair for people who are born without that intellectual prowess. In fact, there will be enough evidence for everybody at whatever level of intellectual capability they have to make faith in God and faith in Jesus Christ, when presented with his history, historian, his words, and the details of his resurrection, his death and resurrection, to make a leap of faith, but not enough to make faith unnecessary. But similarly, for the intellectual who has got a PhD in cosmic astrology, for them, evidence will be put before them sufficient for them to make a statement of faith in Christ according to their level of intellectual honesty and capability. But there won't be so much evidence that it would make faith unnecessary, because without faith it's impossible to please God.
This is true. Now, faith again. We're going to come back to that faith word. Let's put a string on that finger, because we'll come. There's a video in here on that deals with that whole issue of faith, and I've got some comments about that myself. I think one of the main points here, like as we push back, and it's one thing for us as you're watching and listening as well. Just because someone puts forward a question or a challenge from a particular perspective or angle doesn't mean you need to fall into their style of argumentation or agree with the premise. So we've already unpacked one of his or two of his premises and said, no, that's not what we're putting forward. In fact, your understanding of religion, Richard Dawkins, Christianity in particular, is sadly flawed. So for you to critique it when you don't know what you're critiquing well is pretty ignorant. The next thing that they said...
I would give him some kudos, because there is little doubt that many Christians do cherry pick the scriptures for the things
we want to get to that one in a bit. We're going to get to that. Well, let's start there. As
with most objections and anti-apologetics, these will be things thrown out like arrows, and you can't believe a single thing of it.
Yeah.
Does he have a context? Does he divide moral law and ceremonial law into two different things? Has he seen the history of the instructions given to the Israelites? Bear in mind that not only had sin become rampant and poisoned the entire human race, we do not need to see or have any principle of human malady that's eminently more verifiable than sin.
Oh, it's there. Absolutely.
This was G.K. Chesterton's famous observation. Who defines sin? And there you have to go to a perfect being, who says morally you've done this wrong, you've done this right. So eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil severed us from the one who has the capability of guiding us to all good. And therefore we lost our way. Now it's Richard's opinion as to what's good and what isn't good. We want to ask from his evolutionary opinion, why
Well, there's
killing
no
people
such thing
is
as
bad.
good. If you
Well,
have an
precisely.
evolutionary point of view, good doesn't
He's
exist
making
as a
moral
category.
category, and he claims that morality may have sort of arisen up as a survival mechanism over the eons. Kai Nelson from University of Calgary does not believe that either. It bitterly troubles him that morality cannot be achieved with a naturalistic mindset.
Well, nothing can be achieved with a
Because-
naturalistic mindset because it doesn't
Precisely,
work.
because morality operates on an entirely different level.
Okay, so I want to hold this just for a second here. So back onto some of the claims Dawkins made. First of all, there's a high level of arrogance around the idea that atheists and agnostics just are more intelligent and they know more things than other people naturally. I mean, I know he was in a clap fest, but you are responsible for your words. So to begin with, that dismissing of that first category error of saying all religious people rather than Christians versus born-again believers, Christians versus the rest of the world. For him to say that it's just inflammatory. In fact, it's nonsense, and it belittles someone who has a level of study that he has to treat people like
Yeah,
that. But
I mean, 2/3 of the Nobel Prize winners have been people who of Judeo-Christian origins. So
There's a lot in
he's
that.
claiming that all of those who've made some of the greatest advances in science and medicine and literature have been people of people of a Christian conviction or Jewish conviction anyway, acknowledging
which might be
the,
theistic.
Exactly,
potentially.
it's theistic. So, sorry, Dick, I think you're wrong in that sense. The person you dedicated your book, The God Delusion, to became a Christian. So quite clearly you thought he was he was an intellect, dedicating your book to him, and then have him to turn around and say, no, actually Christianity has got more truth to it than the God Delusion.
So another point that he brings up in this, and then we'll move on maybe to the next video there. The next point that he brings up, it shows really a lack of understanding of the source material. Even though he may have read it, he does not know how to effectively read the Bible, which is, he brought up that idea of cherry picking. So there's a lot of equivocation going on. Yes, let me just talk about equivocation, not equivocation, but cherry picking. Yes, some believers of every persuasion will cherry pick certain things. You may see that within the Christian faith of people having women in leadership or not women in leadership, and they will avoid certain things as it is comfortable or uncomfortable to them. Or a divorce, perhaps they will look at how the church has talked about and treated divorce. Okay, that is a failing of individuals. That's not a failing of the faith that is professed in the scripture. So are you talking, Richard, about the religion itself, the faith of, let's say, Christianity now, and we'll put the others behind us at the moment, or are you talking about the individual weaknesses and failings of people who do these sort of things? Now, because you do have an Old Testament and a New Testament, and the revelation that Jesus brings is very different. His fulfillment allows people to be treated differently. Christianity does not go about having its own state on earth, where the Jews, for example, were formed out of slavery, became a warring nation in a very warring time, and then had to go under God's command and clean out the Levant and the promised land. They had to take out the trash. That's not something that Jesus commands people to do now, but Richard would see that these two different covenants, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant, he doesn't understand that they are very different, the same God. It's a bit of a deep discussion for us to get into.
I think he understands it a great deal. He just doesn't like it.
Well, you could be
and
right. It didn't seem like he understood it.
Well, no. It sounds to me like he reads the scriptures. He reads what we see as historically happened, slaughtering the Canaanites, 100 Philistine foreskins for a daughter, that kind of thing. And so, with his sense of enlightened love for humanity, he would say that was unnecessary, and that God was homophobic and misogynistic, and he was a bully and malevolent.
God's everything that Richard is not.
He can precisely. So Richard can afford to have that opinion because he rests in a culture that has been cotton wooling him to be able to say what he wants to say, and without redress. And so he's only able to gain a following because he is in a culture that permits him to open his mouth and say what he likes.
Yes.
Which he may say is evolutionary, but he will later on call himself a cultural Christian, but doesn't know why. Unable to support the reasons why the culture that he prefers to be in is occupied by the people he despises most. But they provide the environment for him to spout his stuff.
Yeah. And
Other environments don't, and other cultures do not permit that, and he would be under the sword.
Yeah.
Of course, when people who have no faith take charge of the reins of power, we are painfully aware of the morality that they employ on people of faith. Look at Stalin, Lenin, look at Pol Pot, look at Mao Zedong, look at the French Revolution, and we can see that when people abandon a bedrock fear of God, they will unleash appalling judgment on people who don't think like they do.
It's pragmatism gone mad at that point. It's
Precisely.
sophistry, and it's Romans 1 in action. Well, let's move on to the next video, because there's plenty of us to discuss.
This is probably going to be the most simplest one for you to answer, but what if you're wrong?
Well, what if I'm wrong? Anybody could be wrong. We could all be wrong about the flying spaghetti monster and the pink unicorn and the flying teapot. You happen to have been brought up in the Christian faith. You know what it's like not to believe in a particular faith because you're not a Muslim. You're not a Hindu. Why aren't you a Hindu? Because you happen to have been brought up in America, not in India. If you'd been brought up in India, you'd be a Hindu. If you were brought up in Denmark in the time of the Vikings, you'd be believing in Wotan and Thor. If you were brought up in classical Greece, you'd be believing in Zeus. If you were brought up in Central Africa, you'd be believing in the great Jude up the mountain. There's no particular reason to pick on the Judeo-Christian God in which, by the sheerest accident, you happen to have been brought up, and ask me the question, what if I'm wrong? What if you're wrong about the great Juju at the bottom of the sea?
Well, there's absolutely nothing in that. That's just playing at that point. First, factually,
well, he abandons
things.
rationality there by saying that they're all equal. And as Ravi Zacharias, and with his various foibles, still had some very tremendous truths to say.
Of course.
And one of them was that each of the religious systems attempts to answer the great questions of a culture. Where am I from? Where am I going? Why am I? What's the reason I'm here? What's the purpose I'm here?
See, really?
And what's the difference between right and wrong?
They make a good folk song.
What he has mentioned are quite clearly very, very different and testable. Testable, scientifically testable. Where we are coming from, the Bible argues that we are created by God, and we understand the biological process through observation. Other religions will believe different things, reincarnation, for example, without any proof at all.
So,
where are we going? If Jesus didn't rise from the dead, Christians would say, well, we're not quite sure where we're going, and no other religion is sure where they're going, because nobody in the other religions has risen from the dead and in the manner that Jesus did. Right and wrong, and of course the reasons why we are here all come together in the cross. Whereas all of the other religions are attempts to works-based please the God of man's
Yes,
invention.
I'm good. I'm going to be good enough. God has to look
whatever
at me.
good is.
So
Yeah.
and this is again where he does not understand his source material. So he's talking about Christianity again. His classification error of just putting religion as a bucket.
The other question is
I'm almost
how-
there.
Yeah.
And the other thing he does wrong in that is his misunderstanding of the Christian faith. Because he has a classification error, everything's vanilla or everything's chocolate. This is not the case. Everything's not just secular or religious. That's not the way God looks at the world. And that's what I mean by that, is that in that point, he also does not understand how Christianity, how salvation works. To say you're here as an error of geography and upbringing, that's why you... So in part, that seems axiomatic. It seems correct. However, God will save whom God will save, irrespective of national or cultural or religious borders or boundaries. Just look at some of those stats we brought up before. There's roughly 26 million
If
Christians,
not many more.
if not more, in India. And these are sort of underestimates to some degree,
Yes.
which is almost, that's more than the population of Australia in total. In China, potentially, the estimates are between 30 and 70 million Christians.
And growing rapidly.
And growing rapidly. In Indonesia, potentially 30 plus million Christians. In Vietnam, 8 plus million Christians there, and so on and so on. And so for him to say that is just factually wrong. He first of all, he's ignorant, willfully ignorant, of what the scriptures say salvation is. He's got a classification error based on his dogmatic secular worldview. And again, apart from the fact this is just a clapfest, love-in fest, he just plays loose and fast with disregarding people he doesn't want.
He has a comedian mockery of the things he doesn't like, with an English accent that tends to provide some degree of
cover.
believability for it.
I like your accent. I believe you.
Thank you.
You're
Thank
welcome.
you.
No, I think you sound very
I'll
nice.
do what I can. If I try to speak like Richard, maybe I'll carry a little bit more weight.
No, you sound like
But
you. You be you.
This business of you were brought up in it by luck, and therefore that's what you believe.
Which is his underlying premise for the
How
world.
does he explain then the conversions out of, at great cost, even at the cost of one's life,
Absolutely.
to Christianity from so many others of different worldviews, whether they be Hindu, whether they be Muslim, whether they be animist, or how does he explain that?
Well, he can't.
Well, there's an attractiveness about the Christian faith, and that's because it corresponds better to reality than any other faith system, including agnosticism, which simply says, I don't know, but I'll accumulate knowledge.
Atheism.
Hopefully, my natural morality.
Well, salvation
will
doesn't
deal
come
with it.
about from accumulation of knowledge. You and I both know that. And so Christianity may be attractive to people, and you can get, like him, as we'll get to in that later video, a cultural Christianity. That's obviously not conversion. We're talking about what the scriptures tell us, which is how God works. God's MO is to have the word preached, the Holy Spirit to work on the hearts of those he will save, and then those people respond to him. Now, that's,
So what he's saying then is, I don't believe what you believe, but I'm glad that you believe it because it provides a safe environment for me not to believe it.
absolutely. And
So
this whole
that's
thing
the
about being
cultural-
wrong.
And he'll come to Christian culture in a way.
That's probably our last video out of these. But the idea of everyone could be wrong.
On what basis do you decide anything is right or wrong? This is the science of epistemology, where how do you know something?
Yes. What do you classify as knowledge?
How are you aware that this is knowledge, and I know that this knowledge is true? So he is wading into the murky waters of how you define what is true and what isn't.
Yes.
He is quite certain that he knows what isn't true. In other words, the Christian message, and perhaps all religions, but he's not quite sure of the alternative explanations which are sustainable and provide good explanatory power to give an answer for the deep questions of life. So, Richard, you had a debate with Cardinal George Pell, who's passed away sadly, and which you seem to have a great deal of difficulty defining nothing, much to the mirth of the audience.
You're not used to being laughed at.
It was put quite clearly to you that you're attempting to explain the origin of everything you see around you as a sudden big bang where the stuff we see around us is what we see, and that's matter, and then the stuff that we can't see around us because it's antimatter, and heaven forbid, forgive the pun, if they meet again, because the two will cancel each other out and create nothing. So, Richard, nothing would be, from a physicist's point of view, the lowest state of energy of a state where it ceases to exist. Now, if something does not exist at zero energy, can you explain for the entire universe, and Lawrence Krauss can come along too and try and do the same thing, that some wrinkle in time, some aberration in the nothingness caused nothing to split into something and anti-something? Do you have any evidence for this?
No.
This is tomfoolery dressed up as pseudoscience. It is in the imagination of people desperate to avoid an obvious first cause called God.
Yeah. Oh, look, let's move on to the next video. There's so much we can talk about.
He says we're fighting a losing battle because religion is a part of our human nature. Well, speak for yourself. It's not a part of mine, and it's not a part of the great majority of my friends in universities in England and the United States and elsewhere. He also said, if we had no religion, how would we do without King's College Chapel, the Sistine Chapel, etc.? Well, you know, artists have to make a living, and in the time when the Sistine Chapel was built and its ceiling was painted, you know who had the money. Artists such as Michelangelo had to go where the patronage was. We shall never know the ceiling that Michelangelo might have painted if he had been commissioned to paint the Museum of...
And that's the end of that clip. It's just cut off. But what a lame presentation that was.
Yeah, he is saying that people become, artists such as Michelangelo would paint a Sistine Chapel with religious figures in order to please his payers. There were plenty of people who would happily pay Michelangelo to paint their portraits, and Michelangelo and his ilk, Leonardo da Vinci, they had a full spectrum of opportunities open to them. It wasn't just religious. Yes, they might have been commissioned to paint the Sistine Chapel. Where did that imagery come from? Did he could he have, if he was in charge of his faculties, he could have said, look, I don't believe all this stuff, so I'm not going to paint it for you, even if you pay me 10,000 ducats or whatever.
Yeah, whatever they got then.
Yeah. Or did Michelangelo have an actual love for the subject he was painting, a strong faith in them, and was quite willing to paint those with the power and beauty at his disposal to do just that? Other artists, Bach, who glorified God with his most beautiful music, and so on and so on and so on. He's drilling down to saying, oh, well, these architects are people who put money together to build soaring cathedrals, beautiful paintings on them, are doing so out of cash, out of a shortness of cash. Most artists, in fact, don't make a lot of money. So it doesn't matter what they paint.
That's why we've got jobs.
Religious ones. That's right. So I find his argument disingenuous, because he senses that the artist is driven by pecuniary means only.
Well, I think there's a couple of other things as well. Like this particular clip, he is talking about a discussion, a debate he's having with another Christian chap. He didn't say who. And some of that guy's arguments, I believe, from what Richard were talking about, two main points came up. First of all, is humanity, are people homo religio? Are we just innately, natively drawn to religious type things? And clearly you look around the world, the answer is yes. There's a lot of different religions around the world. They're not all equal. There's only one true religion because there's only one true God. And man did not make him up in his own image. God revealed himself to us. For Richard to want to ignore that just goes back to Romans 1 again, where it talks about they look around at nature, which he should do as a biologist. You look around at nature, see how incredible it is. God is screaming really through his creation, saying, hey, look at me, try and work this out. And scriptures tell us that these people suppress the knowledge of God because because they want to do their own thing.
They betray just that. I mean, Bertrand Russell, I don't want there to be a God because he will interfere with my sexual proclivities.
You're talking about Bertrand there, not you.
No.
Yeah, no. Yes,
so
because you don't have any.
I don't want them to be a God. That's right.
That's what I mean. Yeah, Aldous Huxley was like that. Yes,
I do not want there to be a God because he's going to interfere with my choices. I want to be able to do what I like when I like, and
with whom I like,
and with whom I like. And I don't want him to dictate the drives of my passions. Well, there perhaps lays the issue.
Yeah.
And so for Richard to say that it's that first part where he says. That
humans are not naturally religious because I'm not.
Religious. Well, they're looking for explanations for the world, and they can test those theories. And he says the great Jude in the mountain.
No, that's silly.
So we are now able to, with scientific investigation, have a look at the claims and say, is this reasonable?
Yeah.
Is this reasonable? Here in Australia, we have First Nations who believe that a great snake crawled across the land. Now, is that reasonable to believe as a scientist? And there are many Aboriginal scientists. Would they stake their reputation on saying that's actually what happened?
No. I don't think they obviously would. I think they would say, obviously, that's mythology.
Whereas we would stake our reputation on the defendability of the historicity of the scriptures, the presence of Jesus, the power of Jesus' message,
yes,
his death and his suffering, his resurrection and his ascension into heaven. These things have been attested to historically and scientifically. Great debate as to the exact mechanisms still exist, but we don't shy away from those debates.
No, dig into them, because if they happened...
Yeah, whereas reincarnation has got no evidence scientific evidence of
it also has
no
underpinning philosophy that works.
That's right.
The thing with Christianity is, ontologically, it is the whole picture.
That's right, and it extends to everybody in the world.
Every part of it works.
Islam is the same kind of thing. There's a lot of research that's just now being done looking at the origins of Islam, and they're horrified at what they find in the lack of supportive archaeology.
Absolutely.
So one has to allow for scientific scrutiny. We don't shy away from it. If we can't explain it, we'll say, well, let's keep looking. But it doesn't mean that we abandon what we know.
No. Now, the second part of that argument, so again, in this little video, obviously Richard is responding to an argument that he had with someone, a debate. The second part where the guy, his opposer, said something about, oh, look, where would we be? We wouldn't have King's College Chapel, we wouldn't have all these beautiful things. I'm like, look, to be honest, that's a weak argument. Christianity is not based on the good things that we would put out or produce. Yes, artists do go looking for money. I mean, you already brought that up at the start, but that is the fact that do people need to earn an income? Yes. Will they paint something because someone pays them? Depending. Yes. If they have a moral objection against it? No.
Ask Jack Phillips, who will not receive money for decorating a wedding cake for two homosexual men and gets dragged to the Supreme Court for his right to refuse. I would be surprised if Richard didn't climb on board and say, look, if you don't want to do something, it's ridiculous. Why should you be forced to?
Oh, look, I think with a lot of those things, that argument itself, to say that Christianity is really good because look at the stuff we've made. Well, that is Christendom. Yes, okay, people in the name
it's a lot
of
of exploited, a lot of money that's been unwisely harvested from the gullible faithful and spent on stuff which is awful. I would agree. And I think we will wear that kind of thing if we're going to be honest Christians too.
Look, another one of those issues, you talked about the character of an artist, what they will or won't do. You talked about the cake maker. Well, what about one I've just brought up here, Thomas Kincaid?
Thomas Kincaid, yes, exactly.
So Thomas builds those things in. He had, obviously he's passed away now, but he had was going into contract negotiations with Disney to do his style of painting for their popular artwork. And if you know Thomas Kincaid's work, you'll know that he has...
The Painter of Light.
The Painter of Light, and also he has little fingerprints all the way through it. Not literal fingerprints, but little Christian symbolisms and motifs, scriptures and things woven throughout. And Disney said, we'd love to have you do our stuff, but we can't have these things. And he said, yeah, okay, no worries, I won't do your paintings then. After which the people from Disney got back and said, actually, no, we're sorry, you can do those little bits and pieces, come on back. And that obviously flies in the face of Richard Dawkins.
Yes, Frederick Hart, brilliant sculptor who sculpted the Washington Cathedral beautiful entrance. That was that's fantastic to see if anyone's ever seen it. But some of his most beautiful acrylic works of human forms, like bubbles inside glass, brilliant too. And thousands and thousands of artists who will not bend the knee to woke culture and will continue to ply their art in service of the God they love.
I'm sure, though, there are artists who will do religious things just because there's money in it. Happens all the time.
Musicians, sadly, and yes, we wear that. And it's for us to discern where their particular allegiances lie by the fruit they produce.
Yeah.
So,
look, overall, I don't think any of those were particularly strong arguments one way or the other. So let's do the next one.
You talk about the Jewish God and you say genocidal, homophobic, racist.
The Abrahamic God, which is the God of the Jews, Christians and Muslims, yes.
You are absolutely provocative on your descriptions of.
Read Leviticus, read Deuteronomy. I don't need to do any more than just quote.
Is that a caricature to take the worst or the most fundamentalist, literalist readings of it as opposed to the thousands of years of evolution of all of those religions?
Two things to say about that. One is that there are many people in this world who do take the Bible or the Quran literally, and literally do think that you should stone homosexuals to death or whatever it might be. The second thing to say is that even those people who don't say that, those people who have, as you say, evolved, have moved on. They have moved on for secular reasons. We've now abolished slavery. We now give equal rights to women. We now give votes to women. That's nothing to do with Scripture. That's nothing to do with the Bible. That's come about in spite of the Bible. And people have now gone back to the Bible and said, oh, well, we'll leave out that bit. We'll leave out that bit.
And this is an equivocation. Yes, there are some Christians who will leave out bits here, there and everywhere. However, his fundamental argument here is quite bogus. And it shows a real ignorance of the scriptures. First of all, the Jewish and Christian God, apart from the fact that the Jews refused to worship Jesus, and the Muslims, Allah is not Yahweh. They are not the same God. So again, his understanding, his category error is blatant there.
Fundamental.
He doesn't understand
That's
it
a
there.
fundamental error.
He also doesn't understand in that who God is. To say that God is, what did he say, homophobic, homophobic, racist,
a bigot,
that is
women.
genocidal. Like, here's a blatant truth to hit everyone with. We need to get to it. God kills everyone. Now that sounds like, I didn't say God murders everyone, but God gives life and God takes life away. Just read Job. Who else is in charge of the span of life other than Yahweh, other than God? And the manner to do that, who else but a perfect God, perfect in righteousness, perfect when he's loving, perfect when he's angry, has any other right other than God to take lives away? The flood, as an example, we don't know how many, as in the flood of Noah, you don't know how many people were on the earth at that stage.
All but eight.
Estimates, all but eight,
All but eight, yeah.
were were judged and removed from the earth. God is the only one who has the right to do that. I'm sure Richard thinks that people in their nations have the right to execute judgment on people who want to steal and take things from them, or murder someone else, eye for an eye sort of stuff. Or if you're going to war, then you have a right to defend yourself. Okay, that's fine. But God has an even greater right, and indeed God has a high moral right. To say that we've now evolved and that we've moved beyond a religious evolution, it doesn't happen.
And he said that for secular reasons, all of those things that he mentioned have been overturned. Not so sure.
Rubbish.
The secular reasons were that the reading of the scriptures, even in the earliest days, slavery per se were servants who weren't paid, but enjoyed the largesse of their owner.
Let's talk about the categories of slavery first, because people might pick up what you said there and say,
because I would, in order to survive, happily work for somebody for nothing, which essentially would be slavery. I would forgo a lot of rights because this individual is able to keep my life, and so I would serve them. And so trusted servants and people who were working for good masters, they would manage their household in tremendous ways. Abraham had many servants and those who were under his household, and he simply commanded them because he was in charge and was capable. That is the same worldwide.
You also then had that category that
slavery, so that women were bought and sold, or men were bought and sold as chattel. Yes, that is a reality of the human condition.
The fallen, sinful human
today.
Condition, yes.
It goes on today. That lovely suit that Richard is wearing is usually made by sweatshops in Southeast Asia. And I noticed that he might not have a lot to say about slavery. He might think we've abolished slavery, but the Islamic world hasn't. The Indian world hasn't.
No.
The Chinese world hasn't. Much of the Southeast Asia has not. And in many, many cases in South America, certainly indentured slavery has been eradicated because of the Christian influence. And it was Christianity that introduced, as slaves and as people who were of little status in the Roman world, upturned them because they loved those who persecuted them. They freed slaves. They recognized that in Christ there is no slave, no master, no Greek, no Jew, no male, no female. In fact, it was Christianity that liberated women, finally. Yes, they only got the vote to various systems, slow to change, but these things were not driven necessarily by secular forces. So I disagree with him on that. He may cherry pick
there's a lot
history
to disagree with.
to claim. Yeah, he may cherry
where
pick
were the
history.
two greats? Let's talk about chattel slavery,
Yes.
rather than, and which
Servants,
is the thing that
servanthood.
not the servanthood one. I mean the ones who have been sold into slavery and taken from somewhere. And you talk classically. We're talking about slavery in America, in the United States, and then slavery in Great Britain and Europe. The two great emancipations of slavery all happened in Western, as in highly Christian influenced countries. First of all, Great Britain, and they're the only places that have done this as well.
Were
Under the
countries.
work of Wilberforce in the UK, in England, and then of course during as a part of, and there were more things going on, but as a part of the Civil War in the United States. Now, no other countries have done this, which is why the selling of not sort of indentured servitude, as in where someone needs to eat and they stay with someone and they work for them for free for their room and board kind of stuff. Not that, but the actual, we take you, I've paid for you, I own you, I treat you badly. That evil kind of capital S slavery. That has only been abolished in places because of the influence of Christianity.
Yes,
at that time.
Richard might point to the abolition of slavery, but he can point to the 500,000 Irish who were taken in the 1600s by the English to the work the cane fields of the the
West Indies,
Central
was it?
America, West
Oh,
Indies,
Central,
exactly. And what about the monks in Spain who raised money to free the slaves that were captured by Muslims in North Africa in the 17 and 1800s? And the Sultan said, no, Allah allows us to have slaves, so we can take them. And it was the monks that gathered money and bought these people's freedom.
Yeah.
So let's cherry pick history, Richard. There is an enormous amount of good done in the name of Christ that emancipated slaves, and it's what has leveled the playing field for the Dalits in India.
The lowest caste.
Exactly, the caste system in India. So you cannot be fast and loose with your little examples to gain some laughs from the audience.
He does that quite well. I do think there's still a form of slavery that goes on in the United States, not the capital S slavery where people are shackled and working. But anyone ever heard of an internship?
Yeah.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
I have been an intern as a doctor, and I know working for nothing for hours and hours and hours in order to ingratiate.
You don't get
yourself
money
with
for
someone.
nothing. You just work for nothing. Next video.
Before the Jesus story, followers of many mythical beings believed that their God was born of a virgin, performed miracles, and was resurrected. The Old Testament authors plagiarized their creation myths from the Sumerians, Babylonians, Egyptians, and others, then wrote themselves in as the chosen people above the rest of humanity. So that when Christians claimed that Jesus was virgin-born, performed miracles, and had been raised from the dead, they were borrowing and manipulating a common motif from ancient pagan religions.
Now that is a very
That's a broad
common trope.
brushstroke.
Well, first of all, there is absolutely no. He didn't bring the receipts. You know what I mean? Like, you say a quote
As
like
usual.
that out of one of his books. It's like, let me just tell you this, and you have to believe me. Well, the answer is no. In fact, we have done on our channel a video about that. When Bill Maher put out a movie called Religiosity, something like that, and we did a critique on that as well. Are some of those tropes and themes in there? You do find various stories from various God-type, religio-type traditions, but to say that Judaism and Christianity have just taken and borrowed all of these bits to make up their own, that completely ignores one thing: evidence, and there are buckets of it. Harvey, have you got receipts on this?
Yeah,
I imagine
precisely.
this is something right up your bailiwick.
As he said, Bart Ehrman has been a vocal critic of the miracles in the scriptures and keeps attacking them, but doesn't deny the presence of Jesus, his death, and doesn't deny that his disciples were convinced by his resurrection. So he acknowledges that something must have happened, but once again, where's the evidence? The evidence for an alternative explanation for the resurrection of Jesus is: who rolled the stone? Why was the tomb empty? Was it empty? Is this historically defendable? And there are many good historians. Simon Greenleaf, after whom one of the law schools in the Ivy League universities is named after, or probably one of the world's greatest authorities on the quality of evidence, was absolutely convinced that the resurrection occurred as is written in the Gospels, and the evidence was the best he could come up with. And there was a chap by the name of a lawyer who had been undefeated in defending clients in America. His name will come to me shortly.
Let it come to you.
But he was convinced too, given the evidence put before him, that the gospel evidences, even with their slight discrepancies, was robust enough to believe the kernel of truth behind Jesus' suffering, death and resurrection, his death on a cross. Gary Habermas, 14 unmistakable things that you will glean from believers and unbelievers alike, from extra biblical sources to biblical sources which correlate well. More recently, the Shroud of Turin, which we should get into, again, which carries a tremendous amount of historical weight in providing strong evidence, even to this day, of the crucified man of the shroud being Jesus himself. So, virgin birth, yes, it would be miraculous, as Mary, who is not wont to be a liar by virtue of everything that's written about her in the scriptures. Little is written about her extra scripturally, but be that as it may, she would say that she was overpowered by the Holy Spirit, as told by the angel Gabriel, and conceived without having intercourse with any man, despite being betrothed to Joseph. Now, this is laughable in a day and age now where sexual recreation is almost a rite of passage in the Western world. So, yes, we can see how ridiculous it claims to be, but it was ridiculous in those days too. For her to claim that she had been impregnated divinely was not believed.
No,
it wasn't believed by her,
shunned.
And she was thought this is going to be embarrassing for them. She might end up actually being stoned to death for
well, she would
adultery.
Have been a fornicator,
although
adultery.
There's no other person and no witnesses in it, so she wouldn't. But she certainly would be banished. So she would have had to leave with the shame of an unwanted or unsolicited pregnancy. But she says no. This is divinely related to her pregnancy, as related to Luke. And if one reads Luke's Gospel, which has been carefully investigated from the beginning, dear Theophilus, and many other things have been written about it, but I write to you to make sure that you are clear of the events that I'm about to relate. So it's a well-documented historic, and Os Guinness says Luke is a first-class historian. Bear in mind too that this was a prophecy made by in Isaiah and I think in Jeremiah too, that a virgin will conceive and bear a son, and his name will be Emmanuel, God with us. That is a tall order for a man as a prophet. If he gets it wrong, he gets stoned.
He wouldn't have known though at that stage. Give him a couple of 100 years.
600 years, he didn't know when it was going to be fulfilled, but this was the sign that was going to be given. So fast forward to the time of Jesus, and the Jews who were waiting for the Messiah, who were informing the King Herod at the time where and when the Messiah would come from. Later on, where Jesus is accused of coming from Nazareth and Galilee, he can't be the Messiah because we know the Messiah is supposed to come from Bethlehem. Little did they know he was born in Bethlehem and then lived in Nazareth.
So, look, an important part of these.
We are looking at virgin birth as a miracle. Yes, it's not parthenogenesis, which is the individual, a fully grown individual, reproducing one of their own species, without intercourse and without interaction with anyone else. One needs a sperm and an egg, not two eggs, so it can't come from women, because they'll only give birth to women.
No.
There has been one documented case of parthenogenesis in 1995. I looked it up, and it was in the... Where was that? I've got it over here. I did look it up.
That's all right.
Yes.
Read it on the other page.
I looked it up. Only one documented case.
Parthenogenesis, is that?
Yes, around 1995. That's it. As mentioned, I think it was published in Nature. It was of a male who had a new tissue develop in him that was another male. And obviously that must have been almost like a tumor that's triggered and started a process which formed another male. But that was one case ever. No women spontaneously conceiving a man. So By and large, it would take a miracle, or it would be a violation of natural law.
Well, we've got very different ways of looking at miracles too, I'll wrap up with this and then move on to the next video. But Richard looks at our use of the word, say, miracle or something like that, and he thinks fanciful, like the juju monster that lives under the ocean or whatever it may be. But then again, he believes in everything came from nothing, which is
not a miracle.
He comes up with the same problem error where we believe, as revealed to us through Scripture and through the Holy Spirit, and tested by evidence time and time again. It's not just that you believe and wouldn't it be nice. No, you believe based on the things that you've seen as well, in that all logic points to an eternal creator
outside his creation,
outside of the creation,
outside the time he made,
outside of the
space he made,
with knowledge,
yes.
knowledge, immense power, immense moral fortitude, and is able to interject himself into his own creation, which wouldn't
and incarnate,
which wouldn't exist without him there. I mean, so Christians, when we talk about miracles, that's the kind of thing that we believe in, is that sure foundation first of all, and then. Yes, we can't see God, but we can see around us what God has done. And the best, most logical explanation of that points back to Yahweh.
I was slightly horrified to hear that Ramadan is being promoted instead. I do think that we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer. But there's a distinction between being a believing Christian and being a cultural Christian. And so, I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. It's true that statistically the number of people who actually believe in Christianity is going down, and I'm happy with that. But I would not be happy if for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I count myself a cultural Christian. I think it would matter if we substituted any alternative religion. That would be truly dreadful.
Including atheism.
Well, it is a religion. To not
yes,
acknowledge that atheism is a religion is a vast oversight, and it's highly arrogant. And it's his very work that's undoing some of those things around him. Obviously, God is in charge of who gets saved and who doesn't. That's sort of the impetus of God. But to look at that, I feel very sad for Richard and people like Richard, and also quite angry with them as well. I have SCOME. Have you heard of SCOME? The simultaneous communication of multiple emotions.
Yes.
SCOME. We have mixed feelings about that.
I'm sad, happy. Yes.
I obviously, that's a pitiful expression from someone who has spent his life undermining Christianity from a point of some study, a lot of ignorance and a lot of willful bad intent, to then say, yeah, but leave the goodies around. Leave the bits I like. Talking about cherry picking, that's the biggest cherry picker of them all,
yes.
Right there.
Why don't you do what your conscience should tell you to do? And that's what Lenin did. He didn't believe it, so he knocked them down, shot all the priests, stole all the gold, and tried to obliterate Christianity from Russia. So these were people who were at least more honest than you, Richard. You want to rail at them and mock and laugh at them, but you're really happy to live in a country where people do still believe in that and have supported it and have built up the environment around you, giving you the freedoms where you can mock.
Yeah.
Try that in Saudi Arabia if you were brought up a Muslim, and you'd end up with your head sliced off.
Try it in China.
In China too.
You'll get locked up.
You can use your vast intellect to see whether or not, in fact, the claims of Christianity are true. And if they are, like your follower, to whom you dedicated a God delusion, you may in fact find that that which you like about the trappings of Christianity are not, in the words of Nietzsche, the mausoleums of a dead God. They are in fact monuments to a living God whom will extend his hand of mercy to even you if you will come in repentance before him. But if you are set in your ways, you only have his wrath to face and his judgment. You may not believe that that's happening, but Pascal's wager still exists. If you're wrong, Richard, you're in terrible trouble for eternity. If you're right, the rest of us are enjoying the cozy environment that you are happy to live in culturally.
Well, I think that probably does us for this video. Hey, thanks everyone for joining us. There's a lot more that could be said,
yes,
but we don't need to. I think you can look at those arguments that people like Richard Dawkins bring up and realise that there are more holes in them than Swiss cheese. Don't ever be worried or threatened by them. We probably have, having Richard's face on the tile, probably quite a few atheists or agnostics that have come along who may give us a bit of a serve in the chat. Please do leave comments about where we've got it right and where we've got it wrong. If you want to just be nasty and vituperative, by all means, pop those in there. We'll ignore those. But if you want to get into a decent discussion, pop your comments down below, and we look forward to hearing some kind of discourse or dialogue. Anyway, for our regular followers, subscribers who found us again in this tiny little niche corner, not a niche corner, this niche corner of YouTube where we are now, thank you for coming back again. Thank you for watching. We just encourage you to get to a good church, read your Bible, pray, of course, believe what the Word says, and we'll catch you.
Investigate all the spirits and pursue intellectual honesty and worship God with your mind, not just your heart and your strength and your soul.
As well. Amen. That was almost like a prayer. All right, sayonara.